زكاتك تدفع عنك البلاء وتحفظ مالك أن أقام.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to part 3 of the short series on the contemporary laws related to zakat. In this session, we will be discussing who is eligible to receive zakat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran Majid various categories of those who are eligible to receive zakat. This particular verse, which comes in Surah At-Tawbah, Surah number 9, verse 103, mentions that innama sadaqat, this prescribed alms zakat, is for the poor, the needy, those who are employed to collect it, those whose hearts need to be reconciled, for the freeing of slaves, and for debtors, and those who are in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for the traveler. So various categories have been mentioned from the side of the Sharia with regards to the recipients of zakat. The most common one is those who are the fuqara, those who are poor. And we will discuss the definition of who is eligible to receive the zakat in a short while. In addition to that, there's also a specific mention of the needy. Mention has been made of those who are the collectors of zakat. However, when it comes to the collectors of zakat, an important note to be mentioned is that the ulama are of the opinion that today in the system that we have, this would not necessarily be permissible. And if it were to be permissible, it should not be more than half of the zakat that is being discharged. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions another category, al-mu'allafati qulubuhum, that those whose hearts need to be drawn near. Now, when it comes to this, the ulama are of the opinion that non-Muslims cannot receive zakat. So the Hanafi and the Maliki view with regards to this is that it is payable to new Muslims that need to be firm in their faith if they are poor. And there's a discussion with regards to this and the categories that are related to this. It can be used for the freeing of slaves, for those who are indebted, meaning that they have debts that exceed their assets, those who are out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this case, it would include those who are going out in jihad, those who are going out in hajj, those who are students of deen, studying the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or those who are teaching the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So zakat can be paid to anyone who does not possess the nisab, as we discussed in the previous session, those who do not possess the nisab, the minimum amount of wealth over and above their basic personal needs. And then zakat can also be discharged to travelers who may be wealthy at home, but whilst they are traveling, they have lost their funds, they do not have funds, and therefore they require the funds to assist them to continue on their travel. The zakat can also be used in this category. Nowadays, it's not as common because people travel with credit cards, etc., but this is another category of those who can receive zakat. It is important to note that when one is transferring wealth to someone, the ownership in when it comes to zakat needs to be transferred. So tamlik, as it is known, has to be complete from the zakat payer to the zakat recipient. The transfer raw, the one that is paying the zakat or his agent, has to transfer it, and it must be transferred to a natural living person. So it cannot be transferred to an organization. Of course, it can be given to the organization as an agent or an intermediary who will then ultimately give it to a zakat beneficiary. But the ultimate beneficiary needs to be a natural living person that is eligible to receive the zakat. The transfer cannot be as a remuneration or consideration for services. So if someone does some work for you, you cannot pay them with zakat funds. And the person that is receiving the wealth must acquire possession and become the unconditional owner of that zakat. So the question is often raised that if somebody has a light bill or an electricity bill that needs to be paid and they are zakat eligible, can it be done? If that person gives you permission to deposit the funds directly, then yes, it is permissible to transfer the funds directly on behalf of that person. Who cannot receive zakat? A rich person, a ghani, cannot receive zakat. So someone who has the nisab or more above their personal needs, they cannot receive zakat. One cannot discharge one's zakat to one's spouse or one's ascendants, mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, all the way up, or one's descendants, son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter, all the way down. Zakat cannot be discharged to hospitals, madrasas, masjids, and organizations. It cannot be given to a Sayyid from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It cannot be given to a non-Muslim, and it also cannot be used for the burial expenses or the discharge of a debt of a deceased, because that deceased can no longer become the owner. Tamliq cannot be given to that deceased. When we talk about the recipients of zakat, we have sometimes an agent, like an organization. They can be appointed to discharge our zakat. However, our zakat is not fulfilled until it has been discharged by them. So when they give the zakat across, then only is it discharged. Another important point, the recipient does not need to be told that they are receiving zakat. One can give it to them without telling them that they are receiving zakat, and zakat can be paid in advance. So before the time that the zakat is due, one can discharge one's zakat. So if a need comes and one wishes to pay that zakat in advance, then he can do that. And subsequently, when he calculates his zakat liability, he assesses whether he has paid the full amount or the still amount that is outstanding. This brings us to the end of today's session. Inshallah, we will continue with part 4. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.
لذلك قال الرسول الكريم فلد بالنداء تفز بالمرام.